and it can be classified as either voluntary or involuntary, and it may also have a physical and economic impact. So voluntary prima facie, according to the guidelines, is when resettled households have a choice to move. And I would like to share one story that in one of the houses, the first beneficiary at Majas was the old lady, maybe about 60, and I was about 45. We went and allotted the house, and when we went to visit the family and the entire team, this old lady kind of looked at me, hugged me, and says, "Look, from a jhopatpatti wala, you have made me a flat wala." You know, that little statement, that was the first statement I ever heard on the project. And I looked at the people around and I was really amazed. And when we came down, the responses were, "We are no more slum dwellers." In Marathi we say, आपण आम्ही झोपडपट्टीवाले नाही, फ्लॅटवाले आहोत. आमचा आम्हाला एक अधिकार मिळाला आणि आम्हाला एक सम्मान मिळाला. That means we got some adhikar and we got some samman, respect. So this is a kind of a thing which I say that whether this is really a kind of an acceptable, the aspirations of people, and whether this is resilience. I think we will have to discuss, debate, and probably go for deeper understanding. And then is involuntary when people who are affected or communities do not have a right to refuse. You know, there are some what we call as recalcitrant people, the communities, or there are individuals. Somehow that little one property may affect. And there was another case study. There was one gentleman who did not move because of whatever good reasons. Then we had to help him out, because when we got deeper into the problem, we found that he had some business interest which was not being taken care by the another institution. So we went, I personally went, got it resolved. So there are people who have certain concerns which may be outside the domain of the project, but we will have to go out and do it. So, but if he didn't move, then it would have been considered as an involuntary. Further, the specifications and the guidelines says when the voluntary nature of resettlement cannot be confirmed, settlement should be treated as involuntary. This particular case came to me when I intervened on a Saturday, and I found that it was turning out to be involuntary, and World Bank didn't consider it was a good practice. So we had to spend a lot of time to make it, ensure that it becomes voluntary, and took all the precautions on document and paper. So that's the difference between voluntary and involuntary. Further, it says that if the affected persons or communities do not have the right to refuse. So this is where the community development cell, the NGOs, and the entire government machinery, when we wanted to understand what are the concerns, that why people don't want to move from a slum into an apartment. It could be location, it could be the floor, it could be the adjoining community. And another interesting thing, I think for people here, we need to understand is from a horizontal scale of a community in a slum, when it is converted into a vertical scale, the resistance is quite different. And this is one thing we didn't have a choice after the allotments are done. But finally, we sat, the kind of the discussions which went for 6 months and 1 year, and the process which was there, we were able to ensure that they are able to move. But there are cases when affected persons or communities do not have the right to refuse. That's the stage where we should ensure that we don't get into. And especially this happens when it is a private sector, which I was working for about 4 years in one of the projects. And once you purchase the land, your rights are relinquished. Like you buy bhendi from the bazaar and your rights are finished. If you are compensated, probably, yes, you may have a different value systems for that. The other one is physical displacement. You know, it could be loss of shelter, And this especially happens more in the urban areas, but the examples across the globe are some of the interesting parts which I find is either it is because of a rural area, you have a expressway coming in or a railway track coming in, or it's a dam, or it's a freeway. So these are issues which one needs to take into consideration. For instance, I stay in Navi Mumbai, Vashi. When the city was built back in early 1970s, Vashi Gaon, that is Vashi village, is on one side of the road, whereas their cultural assets, the village tank, is on other side of the road. And that was one of the first things which struck me way back in 82 when I came here, that how can the settlement be kind of split like this? Probably the ground conditions in the Thane Creek, the geology, all that put together, that was the best location to get the alignment. So that was what was followed. So there are issues when this happens, we need to understand and get into that. So there is a physical displacement which happens for people also. Then economic loss, I think it's very well understood. People do lose certain existing sources of income, because most of the slums and informal sector locally provide services. But what I found in the last 15 years, the settlements where we have kind of rehabilitated people, people have kind of created their own business opportunities, right from women to men, children, the boys, the girls, everybody, they come back and do it. But it's always a temporary. Permanent, we will have to, I haven't come across any permanent losses so far. But probably if we do a deeper analysis, 1 in 1 million, we may find a case. But the point is that it is a situation, we need to manage that also. This is a case which I always say that when we're looking for resettlement and rehabilitation, one of the practices is negotiated settlements. A case where, for instance, the Nagpur-Mumbai Expressway, which the government of Maharashtra initiated, acquisition notices under the Land Acquisition Act and Rehabilitation Act 2013 were given, served. Over a period of time, people came about, and finally, it was the negotiated settlements which ensured that the aspirations of the people are met, whereas law does not per se satisfy the requirement. So one of the reasons for reluctance or involuntary attitude or involuntariness which is expressed by people is the compensation or the I would say the price which they get or the replacement cost which they get probably is less than their expectation. So resettlement and resilience is a lot to do with peoples and communities and collective bargaining power which is there. It's all part of that whole thing, and one has to understand that how do you negotiate and what are the, I would say, the fair means of business practices, because that's also one of the conditions which is put by the World Bank and IFC. So what really, to me, I felt it was like redefining resettlement from a kind of a pure socio-economic situation. It became into business economics. So this was one which I found, not done research much, but a couple of case studies across some 700 kilometers. I found that yes, we need to find out why so, and probably it's an area, if any one of you is interested in kind of studying and knowing more, can dwell deep. So this is one thing why negotiated settlements are faster. And I was sharing this with one of the advocates where we were dealing with this. He says, look, any personal or dispute which is there, the court always suggests, why don't you do out of court settlement? I was shocked to kind of understand this. So what are we doing is resettlement per se is redefined. And bit of further gyan is what are the objectives per se of resettlement planning? I think this all of us work on that it is to do something to restore the livelihoods and standards of living of displaced people. And I think when we prepare the plans, when we prepare the DPRs, when we prepare the policies, when we decide the eligibility and entitlement of any, I would call it as project beneficiary, we see to it that the livelihoods are restored. Yes, but these livelihoods are very much localized, and the new places probably need different kind of a setup and a different kind of an opportunity to emerge. So I would look at it that from first is that a person gets a secured tenurial rights household, a house or a commercial establishment. So that is the first, I would say, that improvement or restoration which takes place. And the rest is depends on the person to uh, kind of restore their livelihood. In case of this project, the government, especially the MMRDA, was did a lot of interventions through the NGOs and their own policy decisions. How do we ensure that the livelihoods are taken care in the proper way? And the second one, it's the same. It's about the security of tenure and the surrounding living conditions. Then what we also look at is that resettlement planning, when the notice is served or when the planning is done, when the land markings are done, the notices are served to people, we also share with them typically that these are the locations where the rehabilitation sites have been identified and built. People insist on in situ. And let me tell you my experience here and my fellow professionals in a city like Mumbai or any large cities, in situ development prima facie is it's a complex and difficult thing because the road, which is especially the roads, public purpose activities, they are the ones who are which are encroached, and there is no way we can negotiate and kind of work it out. So what really happens in these kind of things is that we tell them that please understand that this is what is a public purpose. You know, your cause, 100 people, 200 people will benefit a larger city. Is it possible for you to understand? So I think defining the objectives of resettlement planning to clarify the levels of performance, especially by the companies. Like for instance, in MMRDA, we said, okay, look, we are here, we have taken a loan, we are keen on doing this development plan for railways and roads. So please help us out. And then there are relationship building, then there are negotiations, there are kind of activities wherein we share with them a larger plan rather than a stretch of 200 meters or 500 meters. When they see the larger context of say some 436 square kilometers of Mumbai, and then they realize that they are becoming a kind of their contribution will be positive in improving the situation in Mumbai. Then what we few principles of resettlement planning are opportunity to improve their living standards and income earning capacity over the pre-settlement levels which underlie good resettlement planning. And I would look at the projects which we did, I think 40 plus odd colonies, resettlement colonies which we created. You will find that people have bounced back and they have their own activities. Somebody has started a rickshaw or bought rickshaws, or they're into transport business or communication or retailing, or we have this Pori Bhaji Kendra, that is the food outlets, or they are into some other business which they have created for themselves. So earning capacities have increased. Of course, their local networks do get disturbed because there is a distance involved in rehabilitation. But what I found is deciding the eligibility and entitlement, where human intervention is likely to play a major role. So what I would suggest is that if you use the digital technology, the computers, the ITES and the IT, uh, it makes a good database of the socioeconomic profile of people, and you can easily decide the eligibility and entitlement. And I had done one R&R BSES, that is Baseline Economic Survey, and we did for about 45 villages. The data was captured to such meticulous levels that the child which is 1 year old today, after 17 more years, that is 18th year, the system was created that it will give us a prop saying that this child on such and such day is likely to become 18 and he would come for his rights and establishing his rights. So that's the kind of the technology gives you benefits, no large mess ups. And especially I would share that the inspection panel and the kind of project which we did